This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good to meet everyone. Bruchim Abam. Baruch Hashem, this time we could say welcome to our sukkah. Usually we have it Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who just came out with a new sefer on the chidushim of the Rebbe. So there's a big chakira and halacha. How many chasidim does it take to give it a shame of a Satmar of Simchas Beis Hashoeiva? So tonight it's Gepaskin, the three chasidim already is Koiveya. I don't know how it happened, but it became known as the Satmar Simchas Beis Hashoeiva. Okay. Zol zayin azoy, as they say. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you everyone for coming. All the chashuvim, my uncle Tzvi Hirschfang, and Nassim Mulder from Muncie, and of course the Reb Sender. Usually he sits over here, but it's dangerous to be so close.
Social distancing.
And to welcome everybody, right? Rabbi Yehuda Klein and Reb Shaya Levi and Reb Yankov Shimshon Huss, yeah? And we have Reb Shlomo Zalman Hirschfang and Chaim Asher? No? Yaakov, sorry, I can't see in the mask, okay. And of course, Isaac, Reb Isaac. The learning should be Ilay Nishmas, Menachem Mendel Ben, Aaron Moshe, and Yehuda Glatstein, and Shlomo Glatstein, and Kalman Marmerstein. I think we covered everybody. And Es Asher Yeshnei Kan, Es Asher Einenu Kan. Okay, so we have a very interesting Indian tonight. We begin with a line, a stanza in the Piyut for the second day of Sukkot by Shachris. We say, Baal Tehi mitzvah sukkah beinecha kala. The mitzvah of sukkah should not be light in your eyes. Why? Ki keneged kol mitzvahs das kechukoseh shkula. Because it's shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. Don't treat sukkah lightly, because it is shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. It's an interesting statement, because this statement is not found anywhere in Shas or in Medrash and Kol HaTorah Kula, that the mitzvah of sukkah is shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. But interestingly, the Taras Chaim, who's a Kadmoin, on the Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Gimel, where the Gemara says that the Rebbeinu Shalom tested the Umayis Ha'olam with the mitzvah kala. What was the mitzvah kala? With the mitzvah of sukkah. The Rebbeinu Shalom tested the Umayis Ha'olam with the mitzvah of sukkah. So the Taras Chaim wants to know, there are many mitzvahs kalas. A lot of mitzvahs are easy to perform. Sukkah is not any easier than Daled Minim, than any of the mitzvahs, than tzitzis. So Taras Chaim says, the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to test the Umayis Ha'olam in a mitzvah which is shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs, because the Umayis Ha'olam want to get schar like Klal Yisrael. So the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to test them with the mitzvah which is shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. And how do we know that sukkah is shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs? So the Taras Chaim says, like the Python says, that the Python says, Baal Tehi mitzvah sukkah beinecha kala ki keneged kol mitzvahs das kechukoseh shkula. Don't treat sukkah lightly, because it's equal to all 613 mitzvahs. So we see already the Kadmoinim cite this line in the Piyut as evidence that, in fact, the mitzvah of sukkah is shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. But the question is, why would that be? Why would sukkah be equal to all 613 mitzvahs? There doesn't seem to be any makar in Bavli, Yushalmi, Sifra, Sifri. So why would sukkah be shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs?
Why did they call it a mitzvah kala? I never understood that.
Okay, right.
To put this thing together, the sukkah is a lot of work. That to buy an estrogen lulav to go, I know how long it takes me to pick one out. So
okay, good. So it seems that, and according to the Gemara feels that it doesn't cost so much money. So back then, they weren't able to market the sukkah.
It didn't cost $250 for a set.
So that's mitzvah kala, ein bach yisaron kes. That's the Pasha Pshat, that sukkah doesn't cost a lot of money. So we'd like to try to uncover a new dimension of sukkah, perhaps that we haven't focused on, and we're not so aware of. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Sachabar. Shalom. A new dimension of sukkah that perhaps we're not so aware of. The Kada Kemach we began, we'll recap, we'll start over from the beginning. basically, the Python says that the mitzvah of sukkah is equal to all 613 mitzvahs. So we want to know what's the inyan that it's shakol keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. Karakemach says like this. Rabbi Meir writes that if you look at the mitzvah of sukkah, the mitzvah of sukkah is merames to the Torah. The sukkah is merames to the Torah, and the Karakemach cites 8 examples of where the sukkah reminds us of the Torah. Number 1, the word sukkah means re'iyah, to gaze, to look. Like, why was Sarah called Yiska? Shakol soichin b'yafya. So just like sukkah is called sukkah because of looking, it says about the Torah oz ra'ah. There's an inyan of re'iyah by the Torah. When you get an aliyah, you're supposed to see the oisias. There's an inyan of re'iyah by the Torah. So there's an inyan of re'iyah by the sukkah. Sukkah means re'iyah. Number 2, the Rabbi Meir says, the sukkah has tzel. You have to sit in the tzel of the sukkah. So too, you're supposed to be mistoifef in the tzel of the Torah. In other words, it's not enough just to learn a bissel, to learn. You have to take shelter in the shade of the sukkah. You have to be mistoifef in the shade of the sukkah. Number 3, the sukkah has how many walls? A minimum of 3 walls. So the Torah is also Torah, Nevi'im, and Iksuvim. That is maimed the whole world. Next interesting thing. Sukkah has to have a minimum of how tall? 10 tvachim tall. Keneged what? Keneged the aseres hadibrois. Furthermore, the sukkah has to have, how wide does the sukkah have to be? Shiva tvachim, right? 7 tvachim. Keneged the 7 chachmos of the Torah. We know there's 7 disciplines. All the chachmos are found in the Torah. So the 7 tvachim of the sukkah is keneged the Shiva chachmos. Weiter, Rabbi Meir says, it comes out that the length and the width is 7 tvachim, and the height is 10 tvachim, so the area is 70 tvachim, keneged, shivim panim l'Torah. Shivim panim l'Torah. So you look at the sukkah is supposed to remind you of the Torah. It has re'iyah. Sukkah means re'iyah. It has shade, like the Torah has to have shade. It has 3 defanos, Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. 10 tvachim tall, keneged aseres hadibrois. 7 tvachim wide, keneged the chachmos ha'olam. 70 total, keneged shivim panim l'Torah. Now, the chiyuv to sit in the sukkah, you have to sit bein b'yoyim, bein v'layla. Just like the Torah is, v'higisa b'y, yoyim v'layla. Noshim are pater from sukkah. Noshim are pater from Talmud Torah. So, Rabbi Meir says, when you look at the sukkah is supposed to remind you of the Torah. Now, it's very interesting. I'm sure we've learned many pshatim and ramazim and inyanim in sukkah, but that the sukkah should remind us of the Torah. Why do we need a reminder for the Torah? We have a sefer Torah. What's the inyan that sukkah reminds us of the Torah?
Why are you bringing in women in here? Noshim, what is that?
We don't bring them in. We left them out. We said they can't come in.
What is Rabbeinu Chai talking
No,
about?
the similarity between the Torah, women are pater from Talmud Torah, and they're pater from Sukkah. That's another similarity between the Sukkah and Torah. So when you see the Sukkah, it's only Anoshim. It reminds you of the Torah, which is only Anoshim. That's another similarity. Weiter, there's one of the Kadmoinim. Shas Tshuvas Marivayel. Marivayel was the Talmud of the Maril, and one of the backbone of Piskei Ashkenaz. He also brings in other similarities between the Sukkah and Torah. So if we would have to study which ois in the Aleph Beis is the Sukkah similar to, normally we say it's the ois hey, it's the 2 walls, right? V'tefach, shtei defanos shleimos v'tefach. But others say that the sukkah is the ois beis. The ois beis, 3 walls. Reb Chaim Falaji also says the ois beis because it's 3 vavs. Vav, and vav, gematria chai. So Marivayel says the sukkah is the ois beis. Why? Because the Torah begins with the letter beis, Bereshis. He says further, now this is the most interesting to me. The sukkah maximum is 20 amos. How many tvachim? 120 tvachim. Keneged shenoisav shel Moshe Rabbeinu, ukeneged the 120 days that Moshe stood on Har Sinai, 40 days from Shivas B'Tammuz until Chavches Av, and then Nachamal
First 40 minutes.
40 days from Shavuos until Shavas B'Tammuz, and then Yud Tammuz until Erev Rosh Chodesh Elul, and then Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom Kippur. So it's interesting. You look at the Sukkah, and what are you supposed to think about? 120 days on Har Sinai. Why? Because the Sukkah is maximum 20 amos, 120 Tvachim. Keneged Shnoisav Shel Moshe Rabbeinu. Furthermore, he says that the Sukkah is 7 Tvachim. Keneged Chatzva Amudeha Shiva, which are the 7 Svarim of the Chumash. We know that the Gemara in Shabbos says, Chatzva Amudeha Shiva, that technically there's 7 books in the Chumash, Bereishis, Shmois, Vayikra, Bamidbar, before Vayiv after Vayiv and Devarim. So again, we see both from the Kada Kemach and Shas Chuvas Marivayel that there's some kind of connection between the Sukkah and Torah. The Sukkah is supposed to remind us of Torah, and we'd like to focus on most notably the 120 Tvachim of the Sukkah remind us of the 120 days that Moshe Rabbeinu were on Har Sinai. What's the connection between the Sukkah and the 120 days on Har Sinai? Now this is the line of the night, okay? The Akedas Yitzchak. The line of the night. Sukkah Ba'avir. It's a Shaila, right? The Akedas Yitzchak, Arishan, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, he says everything you have to do in the Sukkah. Whatever you do in the Sukkah. You eat in the Sukkah, you sleep in the Sukkah, you schmooze in the Sukkah, whatever you do in the Sukkah. There's only one thing you don't have to do in the Sukkah. Learning Torah, you do in the Sukkah. There's one thing you don't have to do in the Sukkah. Limud HaTorah Be'iyon. You don't have to learn Torah Be'iyon. Why? Look at the lesson of the Akedah. Amnam limud shel iyon hutter lefi shahalimud asher al zeh hatoyar hu atzmoi gufa shel sukkah v'tamai. You don't have to learn Be'iyon in the Sukkah. Because the whole frame of the Sukkah, the whole image of the Sukkah, the whole shape of the Sukkah, the whole tzura of the Sukkah is for Iyon HaTorah. So why do you have to do it in the Sukkah? That's the whole tachlis of the Sukkah. The whole goof of the Sukkah is Iyon HaTorah. That's the purpose. So I'm doing it. It's a very interesting idea. You don't have to learn Iyon in the Sukkah. Why? He says, that's the Guf HaSukkah. The Guf HaSukkah is Iyon HaTorah. So what does that mean? That the Guf HaSukkah is Iyon HaTorah, as opposed to what? It's not Stam knowing Torah or Yedias HaTorah, but learning the Torah ba'amelus u'be'iyon, that's the whole tachlis of the Sukkah. So we know the Mishnah Berurah tells us that, the Mishnah Berurah is quoting the Shla Kadosh, the importance of Limud HaTorah in the Sukkah. One should try to minimize Divrei Chayil in the Sukkah, and certainly the Mishnah Berurah says one should not speak Lashon Hara in the Sukkah. But the Mishnah Berurah says that Roi Lamayit Ba B'Divrei Chayil Uledaber Ba Ki'im Kedusha V'Torah. In the Sukkah, try as best as possible only to speak Divrei Kedusha. Now, I think many people, because of this, they make a mistake. Let's say, L'mashal, let's say I didn't see somebody in Achves 3 years, since, I don't know, 2 years ago. Come in. Let's say you didn't see someone in 3 years, so you wanna speak to somebody. So you saw Chaber, no, I want to chap a shmuz, I haven't seen you in a long time. So some people would say, you shouldn't defile the sukkah by speaking dvarim b'telim in the sukkah, so you take it out of the sukkah. So no, the Shar Tzion says, if you're going to speak, you should dafka do it in the sukkah because of Teish V'Kein Taduru. It's just, you should try your best to have as much, as great of a percentage of your conversation b'divrei Torah than divrei chal. But if you're going to be speaking divrei chal, you should b'dafka take it into the sukkah because of Teish V'Kein Taduru. This comes from the Shla Kadosh and the Reishis Chachma. But perhaps tonight we'll try to explain the inyan of the importance of Limud HaTorah in the Sukkah, not just because it's a Makom Kadosh, not just because Shem Shamayim is Chal on the Sukkah, like the Gemara says in Masech Sukkah Daf Tes, that Chag HaSukkah is Taseh Lecha, Kishem Shem Hashem Chal Al HaChagiga, K'may Kein Chal Al HaSukkah, but there's a very important inyan of Limud HaTorah Dafka in the Sukkah. Another interesting thing to think about is after the whole Yom Naram is over, after Rosh Hashanah, after Yom Kippurim, after Sukkot, we have Simchas Torah. So, why do we have Simchas Torah? What's the inyan of Simchas Torah? So, Pashup Shah, because we're finishing the Torah, we're finishing V'zayis HaBracha. But everybody knows that it wasn't always like that. Like the Gemara says in Megillah, that in Eretz Yisrael they read the Torah every 3 years. So that means more often than not, they didn't finish reading the Torah on Simchas Torah. Half the time they were up to, they're up to Parshas Mishpatim, and the other half the time they're up to B'haloischa. So what's the inyan of Simchas Torah? It can't be because they finished the Torah, because in Eretz Yisrael for thousands of years they didn't finish the Torah most years on Simchas Torah. In fact, the Gemara says in Megillah that the Haftorah of Simchas Torah is not like we lay in Yehoshua, but it's about the Navi, about Shlomo HaMelech and the Binyan Beis HaMikdash. Because why would you read about from the beginning of the Nevi'im if you didn't finish the Torah? So clearly Simchas Torah is not because Dafka we're finishing the Torah, because it wasn't always like that. So why are we having Simchas Torah after the Yom Naram? What does Simchas Torah have to do with anything? If you want to have Simchas Torah, maybe add a third day to Shavuos, have 2 days of Shavuos, and then be Mesameach with Torah, dance with the Torah. What's the inyan of dancing with the Sefer Torah? Dafka at the end of the season of the Yom Naram. So we want to explore an idea tonight, a very interesting Yesod, which is found in the Joyous Yecheskel, Rabbi Yecheskel Sarna, and is found in many Mekoimos in the Sfas Emes, and other Mekoimos as well. And this is this Yesod is elaborated on by Rav David Kohen, Rosh Yeshiva of Chevron, and is found in many Mekoimos. And Rabbi Yecheskel Sarna asks, look, you can't say Simchas Torah is rejoicing the fact that we finished reading the Sefer Torah, because in many places they did not finish reading the Sefer Torah on Simchas Torah. So what exactly is the inyan?
I said at a shiur a few weeks ago.
What did I say?
That Simchas Torah was really when we finished Bamidbar.
I said that? I can't be responsible for what I say in any shiur.
Because that's when we finished the Torah. With the Barim is just a repetition.
Oh, you mean we should have Simchas Torah?
Yeah, we should have Simchas Torah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what's the inyan of...
said that, no?
Could be.
Maybe I went another shiur, I don't know.
Could be. Okay. So the Rabbi Yecheskel Sarna quotes the Goin. The Goin says as follows. Today was the Goin's yard side, right?
Yeah.
So the Goin says like this. We say every day in davening, the Goin said Ahava Rabba, or if you say Ahava Soilam, Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu Hashem Elokeinu, Chemla Gedoyla Viseira Chamalta Aleinu. Or Ahavas Oilam Ahavtanu Hashem Elokeinu, Chemla Gedoyla Viseira Chamalta Aleinu. Says the Goin. Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu is the Luchos Rishonos, when the Rebbe Hashem gave us the Torah, that showed great love. Hashem didn't have to give us the Torah. It's Chemda Genuza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mishtashtei Aboy. That's Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu. But then Klal Yisrael, they made the Egel. And Moshe took the Luchos, and Asher Shibarta, and he broke the Luchos, and Hashem gave him a big Asher Koyach. And that's how the Torah ends. The Torah ends, Ulechol Ayara Chazaka, that Moshe broke the Luchos. La'inei Kol Yisrael. But the Rebbeinu Shem, after we sinned with the Egel, and Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai a second time, and Moshe Rabbeinu was mispalel, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Salachti Kidvarecha. The Rebbeinu Shem says, now this time around, I'm not only going to show you Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu, I'm going to show you more than Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu, I'm going to show you Chemla Gedoyla Viseira Chamalta Aleinu Beluchos Shniyos. That's the Chemla Gedoyla Viseira Chamalta Aleinu. Because the Luchos Shniyos, they came along with much more goodies than Luchos Rishonos. Because Luchos Rishonos, you didn't have a Mishkan, and you didn't have the Shechina. It doesn't say anywhere the Shechina was Shoire Beluchos Rishonos, but Luchos Shniyos, it was Chemla Gedoyla Viseira Chamalta Aleinu. If you look, the Goin is in number 16 on page 3. The Goin in Shir HaShirim, Parak Aleph, Pasuk Yud Zayin, reads the Pasuk. Hincha yafa rayosenu af naim. Hincha yafa, you're beautiful. Klal Yisrael is beautiful before the egel when I gave you luchos rishonos. But after you made the egel naim, you're even more pleasant because this time I gave you rav tov. I gave you the luchos, and not only that, v'af arsenu ranana. I also gave you the mishkan and I gave you the shechina. So actually, Luchos Shniyos came along with many more goodies than Luchos Rishonos. Luchos Rishonos, you just got the tablets, you got 2 stones, square stone. But Luchos Shniyos came along with all kinds of a whole pekala. You got Shechina, you got the Mishkan. So that's Ava Rabba Avtanu. That's the Chemla Gedoyla Visera Chamalta Alinu. Now, says the Sasamas, Luchos Rishonos didn't work out. Why didn't Luchos Rishonos work out? It was too public. It was too much pomp and ceremony. You know, it was a whole thunder and lightning show, Shamu Amim Yirgazel, and everybody, the whole mountain shook, and the people died, and they came back to life, and they saw the words. It was a whole, a whole show. They looked up in the sky, they put on special glasses. It was like a whole laser show. And when things are public, so then the Ayin Hara was shayleit. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said, look, the second time around, we're going to do it b'tzina, we're going to do it quietly. That's why, that's one of the big advantages of this matzav. All the Simchas now there's no kolos, there's no brakim, it's b'tzina. So, ein lecha yafem and atznius. It's a big chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This way things have much more kiyum. So it's one of the big chasadim of what's happening now. So the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us Luchos Shniyos, B'tzina, B'seiser, and the Luchos Shniyos came after the Yomim Noiram, the Sfas Emes says, which is Bakesel Yom Chagenu, and there wasn't any big announcement that the Rebbeinu Shalom was going to give the Torah this time around, and it was quiet, it was still a height, and therefore the Luchos Shniyos had Kiyum, Luchos Rishonos didn't have Kiyum. Says the Sfas Emes, Shavuos is the celebration of Luchos Rishonos. Simchas Torah is the simcha of Kabbalas Luchos Shniyos. There are 2 Kabbalas HaTorah. There's Kabbalas HaTorah of Shavuos. Kabbalas HaTorah of Shavuos is commemorating the Madrega of Tzadikim Gemurim. But b'makom shabalei tshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemur michaylim lamoid. Simchas Torah is celebrating the Kabbalas HaTorah of b'makom shabalei tshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemur michaylim lamoid. So Simchas Torah is the simcha of Kabbalas Luchos Shniyos. So we have 2 Simchas Torahs. There's Simchas Torah of Shavuos, that's for Luchos Rishonos, and Simchas Torah of Shavuos, and for Simchas Torah of Shmini Atzeres, that is for Luchos Shniyos.
Why not Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur.
Well, we're going to see. Look at number 13. Sfas Emes says in Taf Reish Mem Zayin that be'inyan Simchas Torah b'Shmini Atzeres kosavnu kvar ki hu inyan Luchos achroinos shenitnu b'yom HaKippurim bebechinas balei tshuva. V'yesh makom lebeis kabbalos b'chol shana. Every year there are 2 kabbalos. There's Chag HaShavuos is Luchos Rishonos, there's Shmini Atzeres is Luchos achroinos, and the second time around it was quiet, it was b'seiser, it was ba'keser, it had kiyum, and therefore we have Simchas Torah regarding the Luchos Shniyos. Now, Sfas Emes in Taf Reish Lamed Zayin, he points out that the Luchos Shniyos were a little bit different than Luchos Rishonos. And the way he says it is, the Simcha of Shavuos is for Kabbalas Parsha B'chsav, and the Simcha for Shmini Atzeres is for Kabbalas Torah Sheba'al Peh, but the Sfas Emes does not really explain so clearly. And we're going to elaborate on this further. But in the Sefer Devar Chaim also wanted to know what's the inyan of Simchas Torah after the Yom Naram. So basically he says the same Yesod, that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a Torah on Shavuos, on Vav Sivan, and we rejoice with it. Hakol moedim de'ba'atzeres ba'inon nami lochem. But it didn't work out. So Moshe took the Luchos and he broke them. And then the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a Luchos Shniyos. So really, when the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us Luchos Shniyos, it should be a big celebration. It should be Hakol moedim de'b'yom HaKippurim ba'inon nami lochem. And I'm sure a lot of people would not mind if the Gemara said Hakol moedim de'b'yom HaKippurim ba'inon nami lochem. Now, some people seem to be very makbid about this. They're busy smelling the esrig with the besamim. They're trying to get as much lachem on Yom Kippurim. And taka, they feel very much the inyan of the Simchas HaTorah of Yom Kippurim. But the Dvar Chaim says that, look, we can't celebrate the Simchas HaTorah on Yom Kippur because you can't eat, and you have to be v'nisam es nafshes seichem. So when are you going to rejoice? On the 11th? On the 11th you can't. The Torah says that for 4 days people are busy with the Dalar meaning, putting up the sukkah. It's not even yet Rishon Cheshvan Avonos. And then comes Sukkos. You're going to rejoice with the Torah on Sukkos. Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. So the first available date to be Mesameach beluchos Shniyos is right after Sukkos. Hashmini Atzeres. That's the first available opportunity.
One more time to eat Erev Yom Kippur.
What?
Maybe that's the time of eating Erev Yom
I mean,
Kippur.
Erev Yom Kippur, another reason you can't eat on Yom Kippur, so you have two simchas. You have a kiddush before and you have a kiddush after. Could be. Maybe that's another time. Right. Part of the simcha of Erev Yom Kippur, it's preparation for Kabbalah Satayah. Okay. So let's try to understand what was the difference fundamentally between Luchos Rishonos and Luchos Shniyos. The Netziv in the Hamek Davar quotes the Ibn Ezra, number 17. And the Ibn Ezra quotes the Goin. The Goin was referring to Reb Sadia Goin. And Reb Sadia Goin says that Luchos Shniyim Mechubadim in Harishonim. This is in number 17. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th line. 6th line. Luchos Shniyim Mechubadim Harishonim. Luchos Shniyim were more honorable than the first ones. So the Ibn Ezra says, that's ridiculous. He says, Eila Divrei Chaloim, that this guy had a dream. So, Kedarka B'Kodesh, Ibn Ezra spoke very sharply against Reb Sadia Goin. However, the Netziv says, no, the words of the Goin are not empty words, they're very important words, they're full of great meaning. And that is, says Hamek Davar, there's a very big difference fundamentally between Luchos Rishonos and Luchos Shniyos. And that is, had it only been for Luchos Rishonos, there never would have been shikha. There would have been no forgetting. Because you would look at the Luchos Rishonos, and everything was kasav on the Luchos Rishonos. So you're not going to forget anything. Elamai, you had a shaila. The Torah of Luchos Rishonos was mamish borer milela, was crystal clear. There were no sveikos, there were no shailos, there were no questions, there were no hemming and hawing. Everything was borer. And if you had a shaila, you could be a medama milsa la milsa, and you'd be able to be poshet your shaila. The Torah of Luchos Rishonos was crystal clear. However, says the Netziv, the koyach of chidush was not given along with Luchos Rishonos. There's no such thing as chidushei Torah. The Rebbeinu Shalom did not give Yud Gimel Midoy Sha'Torah Nidreshes Bahem with Luchos Rishonos. There was no need for it. Yud Gimel Midoy Sha'Torah Nidreshes Bahem is needed when you have a difficult question and you need to extrapolate what would the Torah say about X, Y, and Z. So now you need to use these principles, these tools to extrapolate based on A, you're going to figure out something that the Torah doesn't speak about. Luchos Rishonos, it was mamish, black and white. Every instance, every question, every issue was crystal clear on Luchos Rishonos. Some say it was even written. The Beis Halevi says it was mamish written on the Luchos Rishonos. There was no real Torah Shabbal Peh when it came to Luchos Rishonos. Had it not been for Luchos Shniyos, the Torah never would have been forgotten. However, the Netziv says, along with Luchos Shniyos, so Moshe took the Luchos Rishonos and he broke them, that brought to the world Galus. And to exist in the Galus, you can't exist with a Torah that's crystal clear, that's simple, that's easily accessible, because a Torah that's easily accessible will not have enough of an impact on a basar v'dam to allow the person to last through the Galus. So therefore the Rebbeinu Shalom had to change the nature of the Torah. The Rebbeinu Shalom with Luchos Shniyos gave a Torah that you can't understand without Amelus, without Yegia. It doesn't work. In other words, with Luchos Shniyos, in the world of Luchos Shniyos, you could learn Torah, but unless a person really perseveres and exerts himself, it doesn't really register. But we need that because without that, without the Yigiyah Namelus, then the Torah is not going to have an impact on us. So Yibon Shem with Luchos Shniyos, you know what he gave us? The Chidush, the concept of Chidushay Torah. The concept of Yud Gimel Midoy Sha'Torah Nidreshes Bahem. These Yud Gimel Midoys, the Netziv says, did not exist with Luchos Rishonais. In fact, the Beis Halevi, famously in his drashas in Drush Yud Ches, the Beis Halevi says the same Yesod, that Luchos Rishonais was a Torah that was black and white, that was clear, that did not require Yigiyah, that did not require Amelus, that there was no such thing as Shikha, it cannot be forgotten. Either you knew black and white, and whatever you didn't know, you looked at the Luchos and you saw clearly. But the Torah of Luchos Shniyos, it's a Torah of Shikha. You can't retain it, you can't remember it, you can't hold on to it, because it's nebulous, it's very hard to be oimed on the Torah of Luchos Shniyos. It requires extraordinary Yigiyah Namelos. It requires Yud Gimel Midosh Shatan Reshim. But, says the Beis Halevi, the fact that the Luchos Shniyos created a much more difficult Torah brought a great aliyah to Klal Yisrael. Why? Beis Halevi famously says that if it would have been for Luchos Rishonais, then what would our connection to the Torah be? We would be like an Aron to a Sefer Torah. You know, people come to shul. You ever see people come to shul? And all of a sudden the Sefer Torah comes out. Everyone's kissing the Torah. Everyone's hugging the Torah. Everyone's standing up for the Torah. And the second Kriyas HaTorah is over. They take the Torah, they put it back in the Aron, and they make sure to lock it up really, really tight, so we don't have to look at it again until we come back into the shul. So it's me, and there's Torah. And I'm mechabi the Torah, and I love the Torah, and I learn the Torah, but the Torah is the Torah, and I'm me. The Torah is written on klaf, and I go home and I go to my house and I do whatever I want. That's a Torah of Luchos Rishonais. But the Torah of Luchos Shniyos, no longer is the Torah written on a klaf of a Sefer Torah. Now, since it's so difficult to learn Torah, the Yid himself becomes the klaf of the Torah Shabbat Peh. The Torah is now written on the lave of the Jew. So now the Torah to a Jew is not, we're us, and the Torah is a chefza shel kedusha that we could learn or choose not to. Now the Torah is written on our hearts. It's kasvei ma'luach libecha. So now we become etzem ha'kedusha. The Torah is written on us. We become the klaf of the Sefer Torah. So Klal Yisrael had a great aliyah through Luchos Shniyos. Because through Luchos Shniyos, now the Torah became part of us. So Torah's, the Luchos Rishonais, Shavuos, is a celebration of Torah Shebechsav. The Torah of Yom Kippur is a celebration of Torah Shabbat Peh. Maybe we could say an interesting idea. Rav Daniel Prustvitz, who was Ben Doire, the Chassam Sofer, the Bezdin in Pressburg,
It was Rosh Bezdin.
Rosh Bezdin. Who? The Rav Daniel Prustvitz. I think he's buried right next to the Chassam Sofer, downstairs. So he says like this. He says when the Torah was given, every day Hashem taught Moshe Rabbeinu one of the Aser Hadibros. Okay, he has such a chiddush. Could it be that according to this, that the Luchos Shniyos were given on Yom Kippur? Every day Moshe was taught one of the Yud Gimel Midosh Shatar Nidreshes Bahem. And Imkain, when he was finished, it was Simchas Torah, 13 days later. But that's the idea we're trying to present, that Simchas Torah is not just randomly we happen to finish the Kriyas HaTorah, because as we mentioned, that was not always the case. But Simchas Torah is the Simcha for the Kabbalas HaTorah of Luchos Shniyos. Shavuos is for Luchos Rishonais, and Simchas Torah is for the Torah Shabbat Peh of Luchos Shniyos. Now watch this. The Gemara in Taina says on Daf Zayin, look at number 19, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Gadol Yoim HaGeshamim Ki Yoim Shenitna By Torah. The day of rain is as great as the day the Torah was given. And some say, Rav Amar, Yoiser Miyam Shenitna By Torah. The day it rains is greater than the Torah was given. How's that shaykh? The day of rain is greater than the day the Torah was given. What could be greater than the day the Torah was given? What's the day of rain? Says Avodas Yisrael, says the Machon Maggid. What's the day of rain? Day of rain is the day we're mispalo for rain. What day we're mispalo for rain? Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres. That's Yoim HaGeshamim. Shmini Atzeres is greater than Shavuos. Why? Why would that be? So the Avodas Yisrael says, Al Pi Darkoi, Al Pi Kabbalah, how Shmini Atzeres could be greater than Shavuos. Again, he says, Yoim HaGeshamim refers to the day we're mispal friend. If we remember 20, Umizeh Novin B'datenu, he says like this, Nirmaz B'kan al Yoim Chag Shmini Atzeres, V'kinu Oisai B'shem Yoim HaGeshamim, Al Shem Shemavarchim B'ay Morid HaGoshem, V'nasa B'chinas Geshamim Yarden. Now he says, the Medrash Tanchuma tells us that we have two Atzeres. We have Shavuos, which is 50 days after Pesach, and we have Shmini Atzeres, which is right after Sukkot. Yeah? The Medrash says really Shmini Atzeres should be 50 days after Sukkot, like Shavuos is 50 days after Pesach, but the Rebbeinu Shem had Rachmanos on us in the winter, otherwise we're going to be, in the nice weather we could wait 50 days for Shavuos. In the cold weather it's not so easy to wait 50 days. But from here we learn that what Shavuos is to Pesach, Shmini Atzeres is to Sukkot. They're both Yomim of Kabbalas HaTorah. So L'Inyanenu, perhaps we could say that if Shmini Atzeres is the Simcha for Kabbalas Torah Shabbat Peh, and really, like the Reb Sadia Gaon says, that the Luchos Shniyos were Yoiser Nechbadim Luchos Rishainos. So Gadol Yoim HaGeshamim Yoiser Miyom Shenina By Torah. Shmini Atzeres is a greater day of Simchas HaTorah than Shavuos is, because Shavuos is only the day where Makabel Torah Shabbat. And Shmini Atzeres is the Simcha for the Torah of Torah Shabbat Peh. And Torah Shabbat Peh is greater than Torah Shabbat Chsav. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, like Karas HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Risam Yisrael Ella B'Torah Shabbat Peh. So maybe that's another meaning of the Gemara. Gadol Yoim HaGeshamim Yoim Shenitna By Torah Shmini Atzeres, which is a Simchas HaTorah for Luchos Shniyos, which is the Torah Shabbat Peh, is greater than the Simchas HaTorah of Shavuos, which is really Torah Shabbat. Now, it's interesting that Imrei Emes in Masechta Sukkah says that how many names does the Yetzer Hara have? 7 names. Right? 7 names. What are they? They're basically seven Jewish magazines that you can read on Shabbos and be Mevatel Torah, right? You know what their name? No, I'm not going to say that. No, I'm just joking. But there's 7 names. The Yetzer Hara is Tzefaini, Arel, Michshal, Ra. What are they? Evan, Zvuv. What's your name? Yaakov. How you doing? Shalom Aleichem. Welcome. And you're Yossi? Yosef, Shalom. Yeah, so the Gemara says the Yetzer Hara has 7 names. So Imrei Emes says, we know Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. If the Yetzer Hara has 7 names, then there have to be 7 antidotes for the Yetzer Hara. So the 7 antidotes for the Yetzer Hara are Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra, Bamidbar before Vahim Saya, after Vahim Saya, and Devarim, because it's Zelu Umazeh. So it could be, I was thinking, if the inyan of Sukkos is Kabbalas HaTorah, so we have 7 days of Sukkos, Keneged Chatzva Amudeha Shiva. And I realized that's exactly what Marivayel says. Marivayel says those words. He says, there's 7 days of Sukkos, Chatzva Amudeha Shiva, Hainu, Zayin, Yemei, Sukkah. That's what he says, black and white. We have 7 days of Sukkot, Keneged, the 7 books of the Chumash. So then it comes out like this. The Rebbeinu Shem gave us the Torah Shabbat Peh on Yom Kippur. And then the Rebbeinu Shem says, this time, maybe we could say like this. This time, I really want you to focus on the Torah Shabbat Peh. I don't want you to forget it. I don't want you to stop thinking about it. So I'm going to give you a constant reminder. You're going to go into this hut, And this hut is going to remind you of Luchos Shniyos. Why? The maximum height is 20 amos tall, 120 tvachim. And you're going to remember that Moshe came down with the Luchos Shniyos after 120 days. That's the height of the sukkah. And all the sukkah is a Beis, Keneged Bereshis, and it has 7 tvachim, Keneged all the Chachmas HaTorah. So the purpose, the tachlis of the sukkah is, Rebbe Shalom says, like this time, you're not going to forget what we learned. So you're going to build this structure, and the whole tachlis of the structure is to remind you of the Torah. But not just any Torah. Not just Torah Shebachsav. The purpose of the sukkah is not to remind you of Torah Shebachsav. The purpose of the sukkah is to remind you that this Torah is the Torah Shebal Peh that requires Iyon and Amelus and Yegiyah. So therefore, maybe that explains Akedas Yitzchak, where he says the whole tachlis of the sukkah, its whole toyar, its whole surah, is to remind you of the Torah Shebal Peh, the Amelus of the Torah. Therefore, you don't have to do that in the sukkah. If you're learning Be'iyon out of the sukkah, you're already accomplishing what the tachlis of the sukkah is. The tachlis of the sukkah is Lefi Shahalimud Asher Al Zeh HaToyar Hu Atzmai Gufa Shel Sukkah. So you're going to go into the sukkah, and the sukkah is going to remind you it's an ois beis keneged bereshis, and it's 7 tvachim keneged the 7 svarim, and it's 120 tvachim tall to remind you this is not luchos rishonos, this is luchos shniyos. Is it shaykh then that the mitzvah of sukkah somehow is like an offshoot of Talmud Torah? Its tachlis is, like the Akedah says, Hatoyar hu atzmai gufa shel sukkah. Limud hu atzmai gufa shel sukkah. The learning is the whole essence of the sukkah. So maybe therefore the sukkah also gets the skula of its shakel keneged kol ha-mitzvos, because its essence, its mahus, is hu atzmai gufa shel sukkah. Maybe that's why it's bal tihi mitzvah sukkah be'inecha kala ki keneged kol mitzvos das kechukaisa shkula. And now we understand, perhaps on a deeper level, why the Yom Tov of Sukkot is keneged Yaakov Avinu. What does Sukkot have to do with Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov is Yoshev Oiholim. Yaakov is Oiholoi Shel Shem, Oiholoi Shel Eivar. What does Yaakov have to do with Sukkos? But in Yonenu, the whole purpose of the sukkah is, like the Akedah says, Hu limud ha-Torah hu atzmai gufa shel sukkah. So it's keneged Yaakov Avinu, the semel of Torah. But we find a very interesting pasuk when the Torah quotes his brother that the Yom Tov of Sukkot is keneged Yaakov Avinu. The Torah quotes the pasuk ulemeknehu asa sukkos. The Yaakov made for his cows sukkos. Okay, it's very nice that Yaakov made for his cows sukkos. So therefore, the Yom Tov of Sukkot is keneged Yaakov because he made sukkos for cows or sheep. In fact, what's even more interesting is if you look in the pasuk, Yaakov made it for his cows, but for himself he made a house. The pasuk says, "V'Yaakov nosa sukkosa, va'yivin loy bayis." Yaakov, for himself, he made a big mansion, and for his cows, he made a sukkah. So he called the name of the place what he put his cows in. You know, if he would have put his cows in a corral or in a pen or in a farm, then the Yom Tov would have been farm. Why would Yaakov call the name of the place after where he put his cows and not after where he himself lived? That's the kasha of Rav Bergman, the son-in-law of Rav Shach, in the Shari Oira. Number one, why is Sukkot keneged Yaakov Avinu? And B'chlal, why did Yaakov call the name of the place Sukkos? After all, he himself lived in a bayis and the cows lived in the sukkos. So Rav Bergman quotes the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says Yaakov Avinu never made a bayis for himself. My uncle mentioned this to me today from Ramat Yisrael Solomon. But the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says, look at number 27, V'Yaakov natal l'sukkos. Yaakov came to sukkos. He stayed there for a year. Ubanole Bei Midrasha. And what did he build there? He built the Beis HaMedrash. And for the cows, he made a sukkah. So Yaakov Avinu, now he wants to know, what should I name this city? I'm not going to name it Beis, because what does a person need a Beis in this world? What do you need a Beis for? You don't need a Beis. You could live somewhere 12 months, you don't need a Beis. But what you do need is a Beis HaMedrash. Why would it be that you could be somewhere for an entire year, you would need a Beis HaMedrash, and you don't need a Beis? Why? Because this world is just a sukkah, this world is just a proizar, b'fnei olam haba. So Yaakov Avinu, and we see from Yaakov Avinu, that he could be in a place for an entire year. He had nowhere to live. He put his sheep in a temporary lodging, but he made himself a big fancy Beis Medrash. Why would that be? Why would he? How could he have a Beis HaMedrash and not have a house? The answer is because Yaakov considered everything of this world a sukkah, a proizar b'fnei olam haba. But Yaakov Avinu represents the inyan of the Beis HaMedrash, the Yoshev Tam, Yoshev Oihalim, and therefore the sukkah, that its whole tachlis is limud be'ion, the ion of Luchos Shniyos, which is a preparation for the Simcha of Shmini Atzeres, which is a Simcha of Amelus B'Torah, or Ion HaTorah. Therefore it's Keneged Yaakov Avinu. So, two more ideas. How about Daled Minim? There's another Shas Tshuvas Marivayel. The Marivayel says, Lulav, Lamed Vav are the 36 tzaddikim in every generation. Lev is the Torah that begins with a Beis and ends with a Lamed. So there are 36 tzaddikim, and 32 is Keneged the Oisiyos HaTorah. So I don't understand. I'm shaking what is it called? A palm branch. What does this got to do with 36 tzaddikim and the Oisiyos HaTorah? Moreover, the Marivayel says, Lulav, 36 mesechtos should be on your lave. So here is the guy shaking his lulav and esrog. He's trying to avoid stabbing the guy next to him. He's doing all the nanuim with all the gehoibene kavanas. And what's he thinking? Masechta Brachos, I need to learn it. Masechta Shabbos, I need to learn it. Masechta Erevin, I need to learn it. I don't know a word of Psachim. I don't know one Tosfos in Sukkah. I'm Oretz Gomer. That's the Kavanah of the Nanuim, according to Marivayel. 36 Masechtas should be on your heart. Could someone tell me, what do the Masechtas of Shas got to do with the Lulav and Esrog? What's that got to do with anything? Lulav is Gematria Chayim, because the Torah is Kihu Chayecha v'Oirech Yamecha. Now the Ber Heitev quotes the Marivayel, and I was very surprised because he says one thing that the Marivayel I don't see in the Marivayel. The Gematria of Esrog is what? 610. You hear this? The Esrog is 610. Plus the Hadassim, the Aravos, and the Lulav, 613. Why? The Daled Minim are Shakol Keneged Kol HaMitzvos. Interesting. Well, why would the Daled Minim be Shakol Keneged Kol HaMitzvos? Tefillin is not. Tefillin is Hukish L'chol HaTorah Kula, but I don't think we say that it's Shakol Keneged Kol HaMitzvos. And the Daled Minim are Shakol Keneged Kol HaMitzvos. Why would that be? So here it is, the Sukkah is Shakol Keneged Kol HaMitzvos, and the Daled Minim are Shakol Keneged Kol HaMitzvos. Somehow also, these mitzvahs that we have in the immediate aftermath of the Luchos Shniyos are supposed to remind us, the Sukkah is supposed to remind us, is Hi Atzma Limud HaTorah. The Esrog is 610 plus the other Minim is 613. The Tachlis of the Minim is also somehow to integrate and to bring into our system the Limud HaTorah. So maybe we could say a very interesting idea. There's a shaila in the Bikurei Yaakov. I bet everybody here, they have a minhag. You take the Daled Minim before Shachris? We'll take a poll. Who takes the Daled Minim before Shachris? By the Hasidim they do. What? Too early. So Rav Moshe says not to. You know, Rav Moshe has a tshuva. It's Tader v'sheino Tader, Tader Kaidim. You say Shema before the Daled Minim. And What could I do? I don't know. This is one of the things that I still do from the time I'm young. I still try to take the Da'at Minim before. I don't know. That's how I grew up. But Rav Moshe says, Tadir v'sheino tadir. But Bikurei Yaakov writes, in the name of the Bach, that the Torah says you should wake up early on Sukkot. What do you mean on Yom Tov you're allowed to wake up late? No, Al Zriza Makdimim for the mitzvah of Lulav. Therefore, says the Bikurei Yaakov, the minhag of Chasidim Anshe Maisa to take the Lulav Shachris before the shul, it's a minhag kosher. Sai al pi Kabbalah to take it in the sukkah, and Sai al Zriza Makdimim lemitzvahs. Okay, fine. So you do it, you don't do it. You have, each one Naharo Pashte. How about Birchas HaTorah? Do you have to say Birchas HaTorah before the Daled Minim? Well, if you're going to say the whole Yehi Ratzain, and the Yehi Ratzain has the whole Parsha Emor in it, so you're going to have to say Birchas. So let's say you don't say the Yehi Ratzain. Do you have to say Birchas HaTorah before you take the Daled Minim? Says the Bikurei Yaakov, Umevarech Birchas HaTorah Kaidem Natila. You should say Birchas HaTorah first. Why? Why should you say Birchas HaTorah before you do? You have to say Birchas HaTorah before you do a mitzvah. I know you have to say Birchas HaTorah before you learn. The Goin says even before you're maharer and learning, you have to say Birchas HaTorah. Do you have to say Birchas HaTorah before you do a mitzvah? That's an interesting shaila. I never thought about that.
Learning.
Meaning, do you put on tzitzis before you make Birchas HaTorah? Avada. You don't make a bracha though. On tzitzis?
Not that would be the boys.
The boys do. Are you allowed to do a mitzvah before Birchas HaTorah? There's a tshuva, Shas Tshuva, B'tzel HaChachma, B'tzel Stern. He says, L'chayra from the Bikurei Yaakov, you have a raya, you cannot perform mitzvahs before Birchas HaTorah. You're not to do mitzvahs before Birchas HaTorah. In fact, he quotes the Shulchan Aruch, and the Torah's Gersa Birchas HaTorah is Asher Kedushan Mitzvos V'Tzivanu Al Divrei Torah. And the Magen Avram says, we say Lasoik because our Kavana is for Limud, but the Gersa of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch included mitzvahs, because you don't do mitzvahs before you say Birchas HaTorah. In fact, the Rosh's minhag was that he put on his tefillin before what bracha? Oiter Yisrael b'Sefara, yeah? And then he was memashmish b'tfilav. And the Achroinim ask on him, how is he allowed to do that? He didn't make Birchas HaTorah yet, you can't put on tefillin. So some Achroinim understand the Bikurei Yaakov, that the reason why you should say Birchas HaTorah before you shake the lulav and esrog is you don't do mitzvahs before you say Birchas HaTorah. In the Shas Tshuva's Piskei Tshuva, he brings, no. Really, you're allowed to do mitzvahs before Birchas HaTorah. So why did the Aruch LaNer and the Bikurei Yaakov say to make Birchas HaTorah before you take the lulav? Because Tikunei Zayar says mitzvahs on Yom Tov have a din of Torah. And based on what we learned tonight, I think there's another approach to the Bikurei Yaakov. Really, you could say you're allowed to do mitzvahs before Birchas HaTorah. Birchas HaTorah is not a bracha. Mitzvahs is bracha on Torah. But there are two mitzvahs that they have a din of Torah. That the whole tachlis of the mitzvah is to learn Torah. And that is Sukkah and Daled Minim. Whereas since they came in the aftermath of the Luchos Shniyos, and the whole inyan of the Sukkah, it's an Ois Beis Keneged Bereshis, and it's 7 Tvachim Keneged the 7 books, and it's 120 Tvachim tall Keneged the 120 days on Har Sinai. Is it possible to say that the Bikurei Yaakov is dafka talking about the lulav because the esrog is 610 and with the other species is 613, and these mitzvahs, more than other mitzvahs, are mitzvahs to remind you to strengthen lulav, is learn the 36 Masechtas. Is it possible that these mitzvahs are unique and more connected to Torah, and therefore dafka these mitzvahs you make Birchas HaTorah before you're makayim them? So one last idea. So we said that the Luchos Rishonos didn't work because why? It was too public, too much pomp and ceremony, and the ayin hara was shailait. So maybe the second time around, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a special mitzvah, how to protect ourselves from the ayin hara that was shoyleit by Luchos Rishonos. The Gemara in Brachos on Daf Chav says, how does a person protect themselves from ayin hara? They should say, Ana mizara de Yosef ka'asina Yosef. Right? De loy sholta be'ena bisha. I come from Yosef, and ayin hara is not shoyleit on the zera of Yosef. Says the Ben Ish Chai and the Ben Yahu. What's the inyan that Yosef protects from ayin hara? Because Yosef is a sukkah. How is Yosef a sukkah? Let's take the word Yosef. How do you know to come tonight? Yud Vav Samach Pei. Let's take the Miloi of Yosef. Yud is Yud Vav Daled. So we're just going to take the Miloi. Vav Daled is 10. And the Vav is what? Vav Yud Vav. Yud Vav is 16. 26. That's Yud Ke Vav Ke. And Samach is Mem Chaf. Is 60. Yeah? And Pei is Hey. 5. That's Aleph Daled Nun Yud. So the Yud and the Vav is the Shem Havaya. The Miloi of Yud and Vav, Yud Vav Daled, right? Again, the Yud is the Yud Vav Daled is 10, and Vav is Vav Yavav is 16, that's 26 is the Miloi of Yud Vav, and the Miloi of Samach Pei is 65. So the Miloi of Yosef is a Sukkah, 65 is 91, 26 and 65 is 91. What protects from the ayin hara, says the Ben Ish Chai, is the Sukkah. Sukkah is Megan from ayin hara. So if somebody wants to be protected from ayin hara, they should say, Ana mizara de Yosef. As is known, the ois itself is the av, the miloi is the tolda. So you say, Ana mizara de Yosef kasina, I'm going to protect myself in the tolda of the ois Yosef, which is the sukkah. So we see from here, the sukkah protects us from ayin hara. So could it be also that the first time around, the Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the Torah in a very public way. It was open. It was standing on Har Sinai. Everybody was watching. Everybody was gazing. So it was shoyleit by ayin hara. But the second time around, it was, the Rebbeinu Shalom did it quietly, modestly. He protected us. What did he protect us with? So Rebbeinu Shalom, after giving us Luchos Shniyos, he gives us the Hagana of the Sukkah. The Sukkah is the 91, the Yud Ke Vav Ke and the Aleph Daled Nun Yud, that protects us from the ayin hara, which we need to ensure that the Luchos Shniyos have Kiyum. So according to this approach, the whole sequence of Yom Kippurim, followed by Sukkos, followed by Simchas Torah, it's a whole program, maybe that we weren't even fully aware and focused on. Where Yom Kippur loy hayu yomim tovim liYisrael ki Yom Kippurim yom shenitna by Luchos Shniyos. And it's a great and joyous day. The only thing is, we're not yet ready to be mesameach with the Luchos Shniyos. So Rebbeinu Shalom says, first I want you to spend the week in the Sukkah. I don't want you to be harmed by any ayin hara. Luchos Rishonos, there was ayin hara. Luchos Shniyos, there's no ayin hara. You can be protected. And Megan bezara de Yosef, and the toldos of the ois Yosef. And you're going to be reminded of the 120 days on Har Sinai, the height of the sukkah, the Beis of the sukkah, the 7 tvachim of the sukkah. V'higisa ba yom v'layla, like sukkahs noig yom v'layla, and noshim are pater from both of them. And then you're going to take the Daled Minim, Esra Gematria 610, the other Minim, another 3, because both of these mitzvahs, both Sukkah and Daled Minim Shakal Keneged Kol HaMitzvos, because the whole tachlis of them is to remind you of Luchos Shniyos, which is Amelos and Iyon HaTorah. And then after you spend the week in the Sukkah, Keneged Chatzvu Amodel Shiva, and you have 13 days from Yom Kippurim until Simchas Torah, and you've mastered Yud Gimel Midosh HaTorah Nidrashas Bahem. Now we're ready for the Simchas Torah, which is a celebration of the Luchos Shniyos Sheneskaimo Biyadenu, and really it should be 50 days in the winter, but instead what we have to do is we have to celebrate it immediately after Sukkot and take the Simcha with us throughout the Zman of the winter. And thank you everybody for coming tonight and going into Golos, mamish a double Golos, not just to go into the Sukkah, but to go to the Sukkah in Cedarhurst. And Be'ezus Hashem, B'Shana Haba, B'Yerushalayim. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.